There's a story, famous story. This happens to be the first story, the first Chassidic story I ever heard in my life. And this really got me started that, you know, how did I hear the story, by the way? I lived in Bnei Brak. And Bnei Brak is a very, very religious city in Israel. Very religious city. It's like 20 minutes from Tel Aviv. Very super religious city in Israel, maybe even more than Jerusalem. It's just packed. Anyway, so right across this road, like the main road, 10 minutes walk is one of the most non-religious cities in Israel at that time, at least. We're talking about 40, 45 years ago, a place called Pardes Katz. Pardes Katz. So I decided I was going to go there. It's a long story. Somebody told me the missionaries were working over there. We have to do something about it. He saw it on paper. So I went and I said, I'll make children's programs. I didn't speak Hebrew very well. Even now I speak, you know, all right, but I speak with an accent. And back then it was even worse, and especially kids, you know, you know, they notice your accent. Anyways, I was very self-conscious about it. So I brought somebody else with me, and he was an expert at telling stories. A good friend of mine. He passed away a little bit more than a year ago. Yitzchak Lieberman. And he told stories to the kids, and he told stories that was beautiful. And I remember the first story that he told, and the kids were just hypnotized by the story. I said, wow, I got to do that. That I have to learn how to do that. And here's the story. This is the way he told it. Now, the way he told the story, it's a little bit different than the way that it's written. And there's other versions of it. There's also a version which I just read from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, which obviously that's the correct one. But I'll tell you the one that I heard, which is little details. Okay, what's the story? The story's like this. Ready? Here we go. Are we recording? Yes, we're recording. Once there was Yom Kippur. It was Yom Kippur, and the synagogue of the Baal Shem Tov, things were very tense. It had been made known before Yom Kippur that there was a decree, a spiritual heavenly decree on the whole entire community. What I read from the previous Rebbe's memoirs is that the Baal Shem Tov had settled Jews in different towns and different places, settled that they would have a place to live, but a lot of these places, they were under very strong influence from the non-Jews. And so in heaven, there was a prosecutor that said, look, the Baal Shem Tov, look what he did. He's endangering Jews. In any case, there was a decree on the Jewish people, and they realized that on Yom Kippur, they had to do something unique in order to put an end to this terrible decree, which is spiritual decree, which was going to come on the Jewish people, that the Jewish children would get sick or whatever, or worse. And so they were praying, everybody was serious. And suddenly in the middle of the prayers, there breaks out the sounding of a rooster. And they all turn around, and there's this little child, looks like a non-Jewish child, a Gentile child, and he's standing there, he's crowing like a rooster. So they want to kick him out. I mean, Yom Kippur is a very serious day. So the Baal Shem Tov said, no, bring him to me. And he took him under his talit, and he stayed there for the whole entire prayer. Okay, what is the story of this boy, this Gentile boy? He screamed out kukuriku, like a rooster. Ooh, ooh. That's how they say in Hebrew. Ooh, kakadoodle doo. So explain, what's the story? So Baal Shem Tov explained the story like this. I'll tell the way that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote it, and then I'll tell the way I heard it. And that there was a simple boy that lived in a farm town. And this boy, I mean, besides the fact that people that were poor, they had to work all the time. because they didn't. And as soon as the child became of working age, they put him to work also because they lived from hand to mouth. And this boy, in addition to that, he wasn't really intelligent. Maybe he had, dyslexia, or whatever it is. Anyway, what they back then, it just the child was not successful. He couldn't sit and learn. But what he was in the farm, and in the farm he heard all these animals, so he could imitate the animals very well. So for some reason, however it is, he found out that Yom Kippur, he heard the Jews are going to the synagogue in Yom Kippur. He was a young boy, 12 years old, 13 years old. And so he followed the Jews to the synagogue on Yom Kippur. He followed. And he went on Yom Kippur. His father didn't work then anyway. He went to the synagogue. So they went to the synagogue. It happened to be the synagogue of the Baal Shem Tov. And he heard everyone, they were all praying. They were holding, and he felt very bad because he couldn't pray, didn't know how to read. And he saw all the Jews where they were crying and they were supplicating to God. And he had asked his father before, where are we going to synagogue? To pray to God. So this young boy said, listen, God, I see everybody's crying. They're all praying to you. I want to pray too. I'm a Jew. I want to pray to you. And I don't know how. I don't know how to read. I don't really know what they're doing. I don't even really know which way to hold the Siddur, which is upside down. The prayer book is the Machzor, which is upside down, which is right side up. But one thing I do know, God, is I know how to crow like a rooster. And that I want to give to you. That I'm really good at. So I'm not good at understanding, and I'm not good at reading, and I'm not good at praying. I'm not really very good at much anything. But one thing I'm really good at is crowing like a rooster, and then I'm going to give to you, God. And he went, ah, ah, ah. So the Baal Shem Tov said that this crowing of this boy came from the essence of his heart, was more genuine than any of the prayers that were here. That's the true expression of the essence of a Jew. His crying out to God. And that saved the whole entire community. And the merit of that, God negated the whole decree, which was on the Jewish people. And that's what saved the Jewish people. That's the way I read it in the letters of the Rebbe. I just read it now. But the way I've been telling the story for the last 50 years is much more, how do you say, dramatic, and I souped it up, or whoever told the story. I guess Yitzhak Lieberman told the story. And according to the way he told the story, this child had been abandoned. There was in the pogroms, and the child had been abandoned by his parents. They wrapped him up in a blanket and they put him by the house in the doorstep of non-Jews because they realized that they were all going to get killed anyway if they didn't run away, and they wouldn't be able to take care of the child. And the couple, the non-Jewish Gentile couple, they saw the child. They didn't have any children of themselves, so they brought the child up. He was like, a month old. They brought him up as their own, and they told him he was a non-Jew, and he believed he was theirs. And one day, his father took him in to the town, gave him a reward, took him into the town, they drove like a couple of hours, whatever. They got to the town, and his father showed him the big buildings over there, and with the windows, and people walking around, they're dressed with horses and carriages, and everything fancy. And then the child happened to be Rosh Hashanah that day when they went, and the child saw a Jew going in the streets with a talit over his head, going to synagogue. So he asked his father, "What's that?" And his father said, "It's the Jews, forget about it." But he just kept asking him. It aroused his curiosity. And the child wanted to know what it was, and his father wouldn't tell him, refused to tell him. And father finally got all angry, because I brought you here to enjoy the city, and all you're talking about is these Jews, forget about it. They're the cursed people, and God has left them, and he's abandoned them. And the child couldn't get over it. He wanted to know what did these Jewish people, what are they doing? Where was that man running? What's the cloth over his head? What was going on? And the child became obsessed with this to the degree that he stopped eating, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, in the end, his mother took him aside, and she told him, she realized her child was withering away. So she told him that he's really a Jew. And he showed him the note that her parents left before they left him. And they left him by the door. And the child said, okay, thank you very much. That night, which happened to be the night of Yom Kippur, as the child didn't know anything, as he took a loaf of bread or something and ran into town. It took him about 5 hours. He finally got into town and he got into the synagogue, and that's where the story begins. That's where the story began. And he followed the Jews to the synagogue. We walked into the synagogue, so he followed them, and he went to the synagogue, and he saw everybody praying, and that's when he crowed like a rooster. I got it. Right? And he said, I'm a Jew, and that's what saved him. Anyway, the way I told the story is much more, how do you say, crowd pleasing. But if the previous Rebbe said it differently, obviously he's right. I mean, there's no contest whatsoever. But the story is still the story. The crying out of the essence of the soul of a Jew is what really answers all the prayers. But just to add an innuendo, this would work this year, but next year, if the child went, it wouldn't work anymore. Because now the child has to learn. So the Baal Shem Tov took him and taught him how to read and how to write, and etc., and hoping that he would still retain his innocent crying out from the essence of the soul and combine it with the words and the letters of the prayers. Have a good day with Mashiach now. See you all, God willing, on Friday morning, 8 o'clock. Thank you very much.